It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back. Hey, folks, welcome back to the program. We have Senator Gary Stubblefield is on the line with us. Gary, welcome back, sir. You're from District 6. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing good, Paul. Good
hey,
morning.
Good morning. Hey, real quick, can you tell us, our listeners, statewide audience, tell us District 6 geographically, just to remind folks where you are from.
Okay, District 6 includes Johnson County, Yale County, Logan County, and the biggest part of Franklin County. So we're basically in the west central Arkansas location,
All right.
right next to Sebastian County. In fact, I had Sebastian County when I was elected to the House back in 2010. That was in my House district, but after the redistricting that took place in 2010, I was moved over to a different district, either that or run against a friend of mine in the House, and I decided to run for the Senate. That was the time that I decided to run for the Senate. So.
I'm certainly glad that you did, because you've got one of the best voting records of anybody down there, and you stand up for liberty and conservatism, and I really appreciate it. And I really appreciated your comments. The Democrat Gazette described members of the legislature kind of shocked and outraged at a recent report, an audit report on DHS. What can you tell us about what that report entailed?
Well, the day before we had the regular audit meeting, I sat on the Legislative Audit Committee of counties and municipalities. We go over hundreds and hundreds of small towns all over the state of Arkansas and counties that have findings dealing with. I mean, it's hard to explain all the things they deal with, and a lot of these are repeat findings. Some of these things have went on for years. And the thing about it is, these counties and municipalities, they do stand the chance of losing, some of these turnback funds if they don't correct and rectify the problems that legislative audit has uncovered. And that's, that can be big to those people that live in those counties and cities. But when you're talking about a state agency that, a $9 billion state agency that has 7,400 employees, and the fact of the matter is, it's bad enough to have repeat findings. But when I learned that some of these findings go all the way back 2.5 to 3 years, I just felt like that was very unacceptable. And it's very troubling when you have an agency this size that's responsible for 600,000 or 700,000 people, Arkansans, on Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those are on traditional Medicaid, Arkansas Works, and they're responsible for many of the federally funded programs which we have to deal with, which have an impact on the safety and stability of our abused and neglected children all over the state. So that was just very, very troubling to me, because that's going to affect the whole state. I just had a big problem with it. I had sat there for 6 years, heard many of these same excuses over and over and over, and what it came down to, I just about had enough.
You're quoted in the Gazette. I think this agency needs to get its house in order, and they need to do it quickly, because we're talking about a $9 billion agency here. We could be in trouble real quick. Talk about the trouble that they could be in, and it would have to do with owing money back to the feds, correct?
Well, that's true. We haven't. I mean, their budget is $9 billion, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't think I am, over $7 billion of that involves federal funding.
Mm-hmm.
And the inability to manage federal funding program, that in and of itself is alarming, because I know the staff at Legislative Audit. They are an independent agency. They're neutral. They don't have a dog in this hunt. And when they say that we could owe $126 million back to the federal government, I don't think that the response of that's not likely is a good answer. I'd rather hear that we're absolutely not going to be on the hook for $126 million having to be paid back to the feds. I mean, and a lot of these programs that were flagged, and I pay close attention to this, these programs that were flagged, the majority of them were receiving federal funds. So it just really caught my attention.
Yeah.
When a lot of these findings involve the reimbursements to providers in the state, the Medicaid program.
So
I mean, that to me is incomprehensible when the staff at DHS are, they're just not being familiar with the rules and regs of CMS. That's very troubling.
I want to talk about accountability. What is the accountability measures here when you have so many mistakes? And we have reports, again, referring back to Hunter Field's article in the Democrat Gazette from earlier in the week, or maybe over the weekend, where you have somebody intentionally, knowingly, purposely falsifying, was it an expense report for the quarter, and just, say, well, the deadline is due, so I'm just going to submit something that I know to be wrong. What was your reaction with that, and what consequences are going to happen to some of these government employees, if any?
Well, first of all, what they actually done was they used the previous month's records to build these or to send out funds to the providers and they used the excuse that they were afraid they were going to lose some of the providers, some of these patients. But the fact of the matter is that this should have been addressed early on. That should have been one of their top priorities. I think Senator Chesterfield, that brought up a point that she alluded to, that she noticed there was a pattern here. Well, if I remember correctly, I think DHS had just installed a $450 million computer to make sure these kinds of things didn't happen. And that takes me back, Paul, when she brought up the fact that this is a pattern. I can remember back in 2014, right after we had passed the private option, that I sat in a joint performance review and questioned Mr. White over $120 million that the state had spent on software to a company in California that never worked. And as far as I know, to this day, we've not recouped any of that $120 million.
Yes.
And it was just a few months later that we had Mr. Seelig in front of Joint Performance Review, and I was the one that asked him a question because it was brought to our attention that we had paid $138 million more than a lot of states, not just that surrounded us, but states over in the east, Alabama and Georgia, South Carolina, states that had populations that were much larger than the state of Arkansas, and yet we had paid $138 million more for the same program for a state that has a fraction of the population. And I will never forget Mr. Seelig's answer, because I asked him, well, how did that occur? And he said, well, Senator, it was a coding problem. And I thought about this the other day, and I thought, we put a lot of emphasis on this coding initiative. We should have started that over at DHS through the public school system, because I'm sure those schools could have used that $138 million that we threw away because of a coding error a lot more efficiently than DHS. So, it's things like that are just, to me, just unacceptable. I mean, we're paying a lot of money, and there was an issue brought up. I don't have that report in front of me, but concerning the high turnover rate, and especially among leadership. Now, these are higher paid, positions. And Senator Colin Smith brought up a good point during the meeting. She asked why Director Gillespie wasn't there. And I don't know why she wasn't there. I don't know if she had a valid reason for not being there. But if she didn't, she should have been there. Because this is serious enough that the director of DHS should be sitting in that chair answering questions about why we've got such a high turnover rate in the supervisory positions at DHS. There's a lot of questions I still have concerning, we were cut off because of time, but I had a lot more questions I sure would like to ask.
Yeah. We're talking with Senator Gary Stubblefield, State Senator for District 6, and he, like I said, was in this hearing where they were going over the audit findings of the DHS, a lot of shortfalls here. Now, Gary, I'm glad that you brought up first of all, the history of the $120 million to the California company that we didn't get back and for software that never worked. I think eventually, if you looked at the whole thing, I think it was like $200 million on software. And by the way, when we start talking about $200 million wasted, it makes $100 million in tax cuts, really puts it into perspective as to how big the Arkansas government is and how much money we're already sending there and how really a lot of that stuff can be minuscule. But now we're talking about, you said $450 million on another piece of software, and you're saying that maybe is what they were blaming this on. I want to make sure I get this correct. Is that what you're saying? And was the $450 million brought up?
I just remember them putting in some high expensive, and it was in the range of $450 million computer system to take care of all these issues, and apparently it did not. So. It always comes back to the same old thing. They keep blaming it on internal controls and other deficiencies as far as their managerial counting sections, and that to me is not. I mean, that's what they're being paid to do, and I just can't accept that.
So
7,400 employees. And by the way, Paul, I added up. DHS next to K through 12, that's the largest agency in the state of Arkansas. Mm-hmm. They are the biggest agency next to education in the state of Arkansas, and that's not higher ed. And they have 7,400 employees. 3,900 of those, I think I added up, 3,900 of those were in. They have budgeted positions for like 7,700, but 3,200 of those positions were filled. And they're staffed with people who work directly with patients or clients of AHC or Human Development Centers. And then they have 450 some odd positions and another 260 positions that work with Division of Youth Services. That leaves, when you subtract those, that still leaves 3,270 positions. And if those 3,270 people cannot handle these federal programs and grants, knowing that the federal government right now is, I read a lot of things that come out of Washington, and they're certainly wanting to cut programs as far as the EPA and a lot of other welfare programs. So I don't think we can, just count on all this money to keep coming out of Washington, D.C. And we certainly need to know the rules and regulations as far as what the waivers permit and what they don't permit. Mm-hmm. And there was no waivers for writing these checks out to these providers.
So, Gary, this and I'm going to go look this $400 million thing up. But was that figure actually brought up in the meeting the other day?
No, that was not brought up.
Okay, I'm just making sure, because if we see, that has slipped through the cracks to me, so that's news to me. So I would be interested in any information about another computer system that they put in to try to deal with all of this. And if it sounds to me like, if I were a gambling man, I would say, well, it looks like we're continuing to have software problems. We're continuing to spend money to try to manage this with these contracting with these companies, and we're not able to keep track of. Well, surprise, surprise, we're not able to keep track of a big government program.
Right. I'm not sure it would be more efficient just to give them a pencil and a piece of paper and let them do it manually.
Yeah. Or use an Excel sheet. I've heard some people tell me that this could be done on an Excel sheet.
Right. Well, one of the findings was they had underreported $10 or $12 million for that quarter, and they blamed it on a communications breakdown between the medical services and the accounting division. And for an agency this size and with the assets they have, that like I said, that's just unacceptable to me.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be happening.
Wow.
It should not be happening. And putting at risk the the health care of our children and all these programs, federally funded programs. That is set up to be a safety net for struggling Arkansans, and it's to provide safety and stability for all these neglected children, and they should not be doing anything that would jeopardize that.
Yeah. We're talking with Senator Gary Stubblefield. While I have you just a little bit longer, I just want to get your opinion on what we can expect next year, or what your goals are next year when it comes to the tax policy debate, and what are you hearing on that? I mean, I know the task force on tax relief is meeting, and they've proposed a lot of exemptions to look at potentially ending. One of them is the grocery tax. But what are you hearing about that? Because I want actual tax relief. I don't want tax shifting. What do you say?
Well, when I first saw the report of some of the tax exemptions and the taxes that they were planning on doing away with, one of those exemptions was a bill that I passed under a Democratic governor, Governor Beebe. I will never forget it. It was a sales twine tax exemption, which amounted to about $1.5 million. Every state surrounding the state of Arkansas had a tax exemption on baling twine, cotton wrap, and I think the financial impact on that was like $1.5 million. And the day I filed it, I remember running into Governor Beebe in the rotunda or somewhere close to the House stand, and he told me, he said, you need to go ahead and just drop that bill, because he said it's not going to pass, and even if it does, I'll veto it. Well, we got it through with some help of some House members on the other end. Not only did we pass it through both houses, but Governor Beebe signed it, and I noticed it was included in this package. But I really don't think that the governor's going to touch the agricultural exemption, and I can't even imagine him going to the grocery part. I mean, it was Governor Beebe who reduced that grocery tax, and I can't imagine raising. I'm not voting for any tax increases or removing any exemption.
Really?
Period.
Wow. Well, I mean,
not till we get some other things worked out.
Yeah.
And some of these other agencies, such as DHS, and find out where a lot of this waste is going.
Well, I think that's the right attitude to have.
Because when you're throwing away hundreds of millions of dollars because of the incompetence of an agency, these little tax cuts, like the exemption on sales, I mean, baling twine, that's $1.5 million. That's nothing. And every state around the state of Arkansas is exempt. We're going to have farmers just driving over to Oklahoma, Missouri, Tennessee, and filling up the trailers with baling twine and cotton wrap. And while they're there, they'll spend money on gas and food and who knows what else. So we're not only helping their economies, we're hurting our own.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's amazing. I said from the beginning, as far as a task force on taxes, isn't this the biggest divide between Republicans and Democrats? Is, our view of the economy and our view of tax cuts, and why did we even need further debate? I mean, come on, lower taxes, shrink the size of government, put more money back into small business owners' pockets so they can invest in their business and hire more people. I mean, that's what Republicans campaign on. Why can't we just do that?
Well, that's exactly what we need to be doing. I mean, that's the way the founders intend for this whole thing to be set up. It was never set up for the government to be doing what they're doing right now. But we've gotten so large and out of control that it's going to take some very conservative decisions, and it may take some pain to get this thing back in order. But I'm not giving up. Good. Well, neither are we. I'm not giving up.
Neither are we. Neither are the people. And I appreciate you so much, Senator Gary Stubblefield. Thanks so much for standing for conservative values, and we will do this again soon.
Well, thank you for having me on.
All righty. Thank you, Senator Gary Stubblefield, everybody. We're going to take a break. This is Conduit News Radio. I'm Paul Harrell, back in just a moment.